The next person that's coming up is Giselle Coy. She's a friend of mine. We've known each other for many years, and she's architect, designer, and she creates temple spaces and wellness spaces in different parts of the world. She's going to be one of our MCs tonight, and she asked me to give her an introduction. This is an introduction to Giselle Coy. Don't be coy.
Thank you, Robert. And I'm going to give an introduction to Robert. So I love doing this at his events. I think I've been to every one. I've known Robert for 10 years, and there's a whole bunch of us that are like original Sedona crew. Carla, Artie, Michael, Cynthia, Okwala, Joseph. Yeah, we've been doing this for over a decade, all of us, meeting in each other's homes, hosting Randall, Graham, William Henry, and it's just been a family. And I've always loved how Robert is doing it for the right reasons. You know, you're not going to get in this business to make huge money, and there are so many headaches. We always compare notes when I used to do events like this, and he just still does it. No matter how hard they are, no matter what happens, and you can't even imagine what goes on behind the scenes, here he is, bringing people together. I mean, half of my career was informed by Freddie Silva, Randall Carlson, and Graham Hancock. So anyway, let's give a round of applause to Robert Dakota for producing. Where are you? Yeah, okay, so now I would have the honor of introducing our next speaker. There's a particular kind of storyteller in the world who doesn't just document history, they breathe life back into it. It's someone who understands that a camera is not just a recording device, but a bridge between millennia. A bridge between the silent testimony of stone and the hearts of those people who come to them seeking answers. Oana Ghiocel is such a storyteller. I kind of call her the Sofia Coppola of the metaphysical, because this is the level at which she is producing things into a whole new depth. As a documentary filmmaker and researcher, Oana has dedicated herself to a mission that is both scholarly and deeply human, to capture the whispers of our most ancient structures and translate them into narratives that move us. She's all over the Mediterranean, and she's also in the weathered circles of Northern Europe, always with an eye that sees beyond the surface, into meaning, into mystery, and into the very soul of a place. That is a gift. Through her lens, we don't just see stones, we witness the ingenious minds that placed them, their ceremonies that consecrated them, the cosmologies they embodied. Her documentaries have become invaluable resources for researchers and spiritual seekers alike, precisely because they refuse to choose between science and the soul. They embrace both. Oana's work reminds us that every stone circle is a library, every dolmen a doorway, and every alignment a message written in the language of earth and sky, a language we're only beginning to embrace. So please join me in welcoming a filmmaker who sees with the eyes of an artist, researches with the mind of a scholar, and shares with the heart of someone who knows the stories of these stones. Oana Ghiocel.
My name is Oana Ghiocel, and I am an American-Romanian independent researcher and documentary filmmaker specialized in anthropological and ethnographic filmmaking. For more than 15 years, I've been on a scientific quest to understand the riddles of our deep forgotten ancient history, gathering extensive evidence that changes the perception on our human origins. We must rethink our entire conception of the origins of humanity, revealing a new image of the past, sharing a new understanding of our origins. Recovering the hidden legacy and retracing the footsteps of our ancient teachers is the mission of my life.
An amazement at what is hidden and what was left by the ancients.
There's no final history. History changes.
But now the whole of history has to be rewritten.
We need to be open.
Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. And I will be sharing with you something that's very close to my heart. So I have a lot of emotion. I have a question that I had for maybe 20 years, since I started researching human origins and Neanderthal men. And that question was, maybe before Atlantis, there was another more ancient Atlantis. And maybe that civilization was the, yes, it was the civilization of Neanderthal. So today I will be talking about Neanderthals. So the question is, was the lost ancient world, which we seek, in fact, Neanderthal? So the world that is before Atlantis. And the site which I will be talking about is the Carpathian Sphinx complex, which is in the Transylvanian Alps. And I've been conducting new research there, which is actually quite astonishing, because it shows that it's very possible that the Carpathian Sphinx complex, it's an early astronomical observatory, maybe one of the oldest in the world, more than 50,000 years old. And it is also a calendar and a ritual center. So a Mecca of the Neanderthals. So this is, of course, much older than Göbekli Tepe, much older than Stonehenge. And it shows that the first understanding of the sky world was possibly developed with the Neanderthals. Is it a crazy, radical idea? Or maybe not? So I initiated recently a project about the Carpathian Sphinx to test this, to see really what scientific information can be found that can show that. That is a very early astronomical observatory. And it's an international multidisciplinary study which involves 3D modeling and LiDAR and photogrammetry, which was already done this year and last year. There will be a 3D reconstruction of the Sphinx face and profiles and geological and geomorphological investigations. And there's many invited experts from astronomy, geology, archaeology, so it's very exciting. And I will present to you very important findings that are preliminary. So before we go in more depth, I want to take you back to a little girl, me, when I was 7. And I was a very curious child. And I saw this image of the Carpathian Sphinx as a postcard. I was reading books, and it fell from one. And when I picked it up and I looked at it, I was just mesmerized. And one question I had as a kid was, is this a sculpted face? Is this a sort of an ancestor or something, a mythical being that we don't know anything about, that maybe it's a lost civilization or forgotten world at the site, like in so many other places. And the fascination I had as a kid remained with me for a very long time. So this is the first time I went to the Sphinx, and I was 12 here, and my father took me there, and I remained with an image that I want to continue, that put me on a quest. A question, is this a sculpted face? Is this a giant from the past? And to me, at that time, as a 12-year-old, it was just a gigantic question that I wanted to answer at some point in my life. So the questions I had when I was a teenager were, are you a deity, a mythical being, a stone ancestor? There were no answers. This is the first image of the rock formation that appeared in 1932. Before, it had a different name. It was not a sphinx. It was called Babele, which means an old woman, a wise old woman, and a mythological creature. And there are many Babele, megalithic stones, around the Carpathian Sphinx. So the whole plateau nearby is filled with these very strange, enigmatic stones. So later, another question was on my mind. Could it be that maybe it's not a Homo sapiens, that maybe it's a Neanderthal face, what it represents? And it doesn't seem so radical or far-fetched because in Romania, you have very old evidence for hominin presence. And you have the oldest presence in Europe at this point, which is 2 million years. And you have the oldest Homo sapiens in Europe, around 40,000 years ago. And that Homo sapiens, he had a grandfather who was a Neanderthal, so very recent. About 10% of his genome was coming from a Neanderthal. And then we have the older Neanderthal footprint in a cave in Romania, 62,000 years old. So a very important, very deep history around the Sphinx. So what is interesting is that in the last 20 years, the image of Neanderthals had changed dramatically. And they are no longer viewed as subhuman brutes, which was in the beginning of the century. And they are, in fact, there are many archaeologists who say that not only are they smart, but perhaps even smarter than us, which is an intriguing and interesting perspective to look at history at this point. So Robert Schoch, who I met in Boston, geologist Robert Schoch, who's, for people who don't know, he's renowned for dating the Egyptian Sphinx, considering it much, much older. So Robert, just as I did, had this view of Neanderthal that was different than before. And he believed that that distant world, the same distant world that many researchers have thought, was actually the world of the Neanderthals. So maybe a very important, very deep civilization that has been forgotten completely to history. So our perception of understanding of Neanderthals has undergone a dramatic revolution. So if you want to place the Sphinx, it's found in Bucegi Massif in the Transylvanian Alps, and it's in the middle of the plateau, and it has very good visibility. It can be seen from all cardinal directions, so it has a very central position, and it's quite high, at over 7,000 feet. So here is me with Robert Schoch. I initiated together with him expeditions to the Carpathian Mountains, specifically to look at Neanderthal presence, to look at caves, to look at the formations. As I said, besides the Sphinx, there's also other formations around which are very enigmatic and interesting, and Robert was very interested to see that. So, of course, the first thing we did, we went to the Carpathian Sphinx, and it was a great moment because it happened to be on the summer solstice, which is going to be very important. So yes, in his assessment, Robert considered that it is indisputable evidence of Neanderthal presence, and Neanderthal people on the plateau would be recognized, these faces, as readily, perhaps more readily than we do today. So he looked very closely to the Carpathian Sphinx, and I showed you before the profile of the Sphinx that is from another side, which looks very much like a Homo sapiens. But this profile, it looks more anthropoid, more Neanderthal. So he considered that it's definitely a Neanderthal simulacrum, and that it could have been also touched by human hands, enhanced. This is from another side. And what's interesting is that he noticed then that the Sphinx gazes west to the setting sun, perfectly aligned. The eye of the Sphinx is perfectly aligned to where the sun goes down exactly. So just to give a perspective, that's the Sphinx on the bottom, and about an hour and a half distance, walking distance, is a formation called Human Being, and it is on the highest peak. This is another view, the Sphinx at the bottom, and Omu Peak, which means the peak of the human being in Romanian, is an hour and a half walking, but it's also visible from the Sphinx. You can actually see the rock. So this is another view of it. And it also has two profiles. Robert, when he saw it, he said again that it looks like a Neanderthal. And he noticed that the eyes look up to the sky. He also found evidence of cub marks and cupels and other things that he considered that this must be touched by humans, that they're not completely natural, and that it shows that Neanderthals were here for a long time in order to do this. So this is the conclusion that Robert had after his trips to Romania, that I have no doubt that the Carpathian Sphinx and Bucegi Mountains were a major cultural nucleus, a prehistoric Mecca during the Ice Age, tens of thousands of years ago. Bucegi Plateau was both a stronghold and ritualistic center for Neanderthal populations during the last Ice Age. And I will just play you a very short clip from the film The Riddle of the Carpathian Sphinx we did together.
This entire complex, which in many ways is symbolized by the Carpathian Sphinx, is a huge religious, ceremonial, ritualistic complex that must have been incredibly important to the Neanderthal people for generations and generations, probably thousands and thousands of generations. We can think of the Carpathian Sphinx as being a symbol for a lost world, literally a lost people, a lost culture.
So we also, besides the riddle of the Carpathian Sphinx, we also published articles together. And he was the one that raised the possibility first that was this the world that we seek, the world of the Neanderthals. And besides Robert, there were other experts in other fields who came to look at the Carpathian Sphinx complex. And one of them is Javier Russo, a symbologist and artist from Peru, and also trained in shamanism. So he really he felt very strongly, and he was very impressed by the site, and considered that definitely the Sphinx and these formations are shamanic, and there were shamanic practices taking place at very deep time. And Javier is also the grandson of Daniel Russo, who was an ancient researcher that came to the Transylvanian Alps and that looked at the Sphinx, and he thought that it was an ancient monument sculpted before the flood, damaged in the face. And his grandson, he thought definitely that there must be a connection between the stones and the sky and the stars. So at that moment, I realized that I need to pursue this in a more scientific way, to see if the stones, the Carpathian Sphinx, the Babele, the peak of the human being, if they align to certain stars, if the gazes of the formations look up to the sky, and of course, if any stars or constellations that could have been important for us today appear in that region of the sky. We also looked at the sun, because the sun is very easy to figure out. So for that, I brought on board an astrophysicist who contributed to NASA projects and National Geographic, so very, very good with scientific training. And what we did, we realized we need to make a project that is at least a year long to go and experience the equinoxes and also the solstices and spend nights. So do a lot of field work just to see these formations and to be there and to try, even of course we are modern humans, to try to be in that space the Neanderthals occupied. And so the first thing that was needed to be figured out was how were the stars 50,000 years ago when Neanderthals were at these sites. So we had to take in consideration the Milankovitch cycles, which are precession and the eccentricity and obliquity, these three cycles, to figure out, first of all, how was the weather compared to how it is today. And the weather was pretty much similar to how it is today. The winters were just a bit colder by a few degrees, and the summers were a bit hotter, and the days were just a bit longer by a few minutes only. So pretty much very similar conditions to what we were doing today. What is interesting is that 50,000 years, 52,000 years ago, there are two cycles of precession. Each cycle is 26,000 years, where the planet moves and makes a wobble, and the constellations move, and in 26,000 years, they return to the same positions. So there are two cycles of precession, which is important because that means that pretty much what we see today when we go at night, it's very similar to what they saw. So it's a lucky phenomenon at this point. If we're going to do this in 1,000 years from now, it's not going to be similar. So she looked at precession of the North Pole, because this is important. The North Pole today is Polaris. When it was in ancient Egypt, it was Tuban, Alpha Draconis. So it moves in time. The first time we went was for the summer solstice. And it ended up being a very, very special time. We didn't know, we just went. And what I liked about this astrophysicist is that she said, we'll go and we'll figure out what we can do. We don't know what we're gonna find. So being open, it's very, very important. And so we went for the summer solstice sunset, and we realized that, just as Robert Schoch said, the eye of the Sphinx aligns perfectly to where the sun sets. So we realized this could be very important. So we did simulations. In programs with the 3D modeling, just to see, and this is for the summer solstice. And then we did other simulations for winter solstice. And you can see in the summer solstice, the orbit is completely illuminated. But in the winter time, it's completely in the dark. And then for the spring equinox, it's still is still partly illuminated. So we had to figure out exactly what is the window in time when the orbit of the Sphinx is actually completely illuminated, because this could be very important in relation to Neanderthal culture. So, and the eye of the Sphinx is directly oriented to the azimuth of the setting sun at the Sphinx altitude. And using the software, we realized that that period is between April 21st and August 15, roughly 3.5 months, which corresponds to the time when it's late spring and summer, which was a perfect Neanderthal season for hunting. Especially they were hunting juvenile animals, and they were going for small cave bears, juvenile cave bears, and bison and mammoths. This has been found archaeologically, so we know it was their behavior. So then we realized that there is the reason why, why the orbit is enhanced is because they needed, this was very important for them. We did simulations for the solstices and for the equinoxes, and this is for the summer solstice. And it's very interesting that at the summer solstice, you have the constellation of the Great Bear, the Big Dipper, and Neanderthals had a bear cult. So it's, which I will talk about a bit later. And at spring equinox, you have an alignment with the Pleiades. So in the summer, you have an alignment with the sunset on the summer solstice. Then you have an alignment in spring in the same place with the Pleiades. And then at winter solstice, again, the Pleiades. We did it also for other formations that Robert Schoch found to be Neanderthal simulacra. So this formation nearby the Sphinx has a line of sight that it's looking east 90 degrees, and it's also looking to the Pleiades constellation Heliacal Rise. And it's facing the sunrise at equinox. We also did it for the human being peak. And the best illumination, it's on the summer solstice, again. But at the Sphinx, you have the summer solstice sunset, and at the human being peak, you have the sunrise. And at winter solstice, the face of the rock is looking up exactly to where the Big Bear constellation is. So in the summer, you have it at the Sphinx, and then in the winter, winter solstice, you have it at the human being peak. The human being peak is also looking to the North Celestial Pole, to that region of the sky. After this, we continue and we did photogrammetry and LiDAR, which is still happening. It will continue in the next few years. And I invited other experts to look at the sites and give their view and opinion. And Elle Clifford, who's a prehistorian and cave art specialist, she came this summer. She feels that something like this Buchet Sphinx being illuminated during a particular period could have been part of the theater of when something important began or happened. Myths and folklore and magical beliefs could have been tied to this event, and I'm sure they were, and the importance of what else they were doing during this period. So they would have, for summer solstice, rituals or ceremonies or things that would be important for them, but we don't know exactly what they would be. But for definitely, they would be gathering. And in Elle's view, everything that we can see now, they would have seen. So the fact that you have these very large stone formations, which are strategically placed on the plateau, and they're connected this way, would have been seen as something supernatural. And that would make it even more important for them. So just to summarize, Anthony Aveni, who's a very well-known archaeoastronomer, he said that the Carpathian Sphinx was enhanced. Elle Clifford, that everything that we can see now, Neanderthals would have seen also. And an archaeologist from Romania specializing in Neanderthals, the Neanderthals were master geologists and master craftsmen. And Marin Cârciumaru has a very long career, more than 50 years, and he's the #1 expert on Neanderthal symbolism in Romania and also renowned worldwide. And he discovered in Romania the oldest Neanderthal ochre containers made from stalagmites. So Neanderthals were using these containers to put ochre, different shades of ochre, and then they would use it for body painting. You also have very extraordinary evidence of the Neanderthal cave bear cult in Romania, in Romanian caves, that is over 80,000 years old. And they were placing the skulls in different arrangements, which were to the cardinal axis, north, south, or east, west. And there are other experts who believe that the Neanderthal, that studied Neanderthal burials, and they realized that the body was placed on, most of the time, in north-south or east-west. So they definitely knew the cardinal points. Just other supporting evidence for Neanderthal behavior is this circular constructions from Brunichel. So they were making stone circles 175,000 years ago. In France, I talked to archaeologists that dedicated more than 30 years to this study of this cave, where they found the oldest engravings, which are Neanderthal, and a Neanderthal mask, which is 75,000 years. Also Neanderthal paintings, which are the oldest in Europe and the oldest in the world. So it really, all this evidence shows that Neanderthals were innovators and pioneers. And there are scientists who believe that perhaps it was anatomically modern humans that inherited Neanderthal knowledge. And especially when we talk about cosmovision and understanding of the sky to navigate to move around, and mythologies. And for example, in La Ferracie cave, which is a very important Neanderthal site, there's a burial stone which has cupels, and it's been interpreted as being a stellar map. So that is, again, over 50,000 years old. And when we go to talk about the Pleiades, this is documented very well that the Pleiades appeared in the Lascaux cave 17,000 years ago in the Hall of the Bulls. And in other articles and evidence that the Pleiades were known when the first human migration started. So that means at least 100,000 years. Same for the Great Bear constellation. There's evidence that they were worshiping it at least 100,000 years ago. So there's this possibility that Neanderthals were the first Skywatchers. So perhaps history needs to be rewritten or rethink that early Homo sapiens, upon entering Eurasia, encounter an already ancient Neanderthal sky tradition centered on the Pleiades and the circumpolar stars, and absorbed the celestial motifs, which were later spread worldwide along their migration routes. So, just as an exercise, we thought about, okay, if the Carpathian Sphinx complex expresses an ancient dialogue between stone and sky, can we find an echo of the same cosmic vision in ancient Egypt? Sphinx pyramids and the precise alignments. Ancient Egypt is well known for astronomy, so this summer I went with Italian archaeoastronomer Giulio Magli, who spent many years researching ancient astronomy of the ancient Egyptians. And we went to Saqqara together, and the Step Pyramid, which is the oldest pyramid of King Djoser. There is a very curious, they call it serdab, chapel, that is close to the pyramid. And the chapel has two holes, very curious holes. And actually those, if you look through those holes, you see a statue of the king. So the king was watching the stars. And astronomers looked at it and saw that they actually were watching, in the time of the Egyptians, the Mesketiu, which is the great bear for them. It was Mesketiu. And another star from Ursa Minor, from the Little Dipper. So one star from the Big Dipper and one from the Small Dipper. So the circumpolar stars they were watching, which ancient Egyptians called the imperishable stars, the stars that never set. It was the region of the sky that was most important for them, for the pharaoh to go. And in the pyramid text, you have the doors of the sky are opened for you by Mesketiu, that you may join the imperishable stars. Unas crosses the winding waterway. He travels to the place where the imperishable stars are. Mesketiu opens the sky for you. The bull's eye leads you to the northern sky. Mesketiu being the Great Bear constellation. We went also to other pyramids, and these are the pyramids of Sneferu, the father of Khufu, builder of the Great Pyramid. And the descending passage to the pyramid aligns to the pole star at the time of the ancient Egyptians. And another pyramid from Sneferu also aligns. And then you have the Great Pyramid that has, in the King's Chamber and Queen's Chamber, shafts that go to the pole star in ancient Egypt, which was Tuban, and to a star in Ursa Minor, and on the other side to Orion, to the region of the sky where is Orion and Sirius, and the Pleiades. So these two regions were very, very important for the ancient Egyptians' cosmology. And it's very interesting that you find the same regions in the sky in the Carpathian Sphinx and Omu Peak. So with Giulio Magli studied Giza. He and others, but he was one of the astronomers who realized that the two pyramids, at the summer solstice, the sun sets exactly between them. And which, of course, it's a very important hieroglyph for the ancient Egyptians, Akhet, which was a horizon, but it was a symbolic horizon of when the pharaoh's soul would go to the sky. And you can see it pictured here, and also between lines. And the Sphinx in Giza, according to a known Egyptologist, was naturally very proeminent and sacred for many thousands and thousands of years. She said that the landscape was sacred before it was used for pyramid building. First, it was the cultural appropriation of the rock exposure at Giza, the Sphinx rock, and its possible link to ancestral memory, that it was a landscape of memory. And it may be something about the Sphinx promontory that gave its character, that it was very large and possibly looked human-like or Sphinx-like in its original form. And perhaps pre-dynastic people culturally appropriated the Sphinx rock as a relic left by their ancestors. The human-like appearance of the landform may have been perceived as a ruined sculpture shaped in the past and left by their ancestors. The rock may have influenced people's later choice in burying their dead. And Giza may have acquired sacred significance in the pre-dynastic as being a place used and altered by their ancestors. And the Sphinx may have been interpreted as a monumental relic left and by people in pre-dynastic period. So I was there, we were there together with Giulio Magli for the summer solstice in Giza, and it's quite an extraordinary experience to see the Akhet in real form. So this is how it looks when the sun is very down, almost setting. It makes a hollow around the Sphinx head, around the back of the head. So it was a natural marker of the summer solstice sunset from many, many, many thousands of years, which is a reason why this rock was worshipped, and later it became the Egyptian Sphinx. So it was a monument that marked the beginning of the inundation of the Nile. The period of inundation starts after the summer solstice, so it's a perfect marker for it. And of course, the inundation of the Nile was the most important event in ancient Egyptians' life. So I will play for you the summer solstice sunset. This was taken from the angle where you don't see the halo on the Sphinx, but you see how extraordinary it is that the sun sets between the two pyramids. So going back to the Carpathian Sphinx, just as the Egyptian Sphinx is also a marker of the summer solstice sunset, but for Neanderthals, it was for a different reason, that it was the period where it was most important for their social life and for hunting. And I will just play a clip from the summer solstice sunset at the Carpathian Sphinx. So our preliminary conclusion is that Neanderthals may have mapped our skies first, that they may have been the first to read, name, follow, ritualize, and mythologize the sky. They may have observed, tracked, and used our oldest known constellations, and may have created myths around them. And today you have seen their sky again. And maybe this is the beginning of a much deeper understanding of Neanderthals, which is very important also because we are part Neanderthal. So not only genes were transferred to us, but very important ancient wisdom and very important culture markers. So just about me, where you can contact me. This is my information. And the films that I'm working on, Quest for Ancient Stones and Skies, which talks about this in much more detail, and Neanderthal Legacy are coming up in the next 2 years. And I'll also be leading for the first time a tour, Ancient Romania, in the summer 27. And one of the objectives is to be at the Carpathian Sphinx for summer solstice. So thank you very much.
Okay, all right, we're live right now. We just got done. We're witnessing a fantastic presentation from Oana. Give us your thoughts about the convention. What do you think so far? How's it been for you here, and what have you enjoyed about this place?
Oh, I just adore everybody's presentation.
Yeah.
I think there's so many amazing ideas coming out, and I think people are very friendly, and I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, we're super glad to have you. Now, I didn't catch all of your presentation. I was unfortunately walked in towards the end of it, but the last part I caught, you were talking about the pyramids being with the Sphinx being a marker for the summer solstice. So I had a question for you. So the rock that the Sphinx was carved of existed first, right?
Yes.
And then do you think they built those two pyramids in location to that specifically because of that location?
Yes.
To mark that event.
Yes, and Robert Schoch talks also about this. I didn't have time to get into this, the presentation about it.
Yeah.
But on the place where the Great Pyramid is located, you had a mound. So you had a small pyramid,
Wow.
natural pyramid, and you also had a cave. which was used for, it still exists on top of the Great Pyramid.
Yeah.
So you had the cave which was sacred, and you had also a small mountain, a mound, and where the second pyramid is located, you also had a small mound.
Interesting.
So the places were already marked.
Yeah. So all three places then were marked. You had the rock for the Sphinx,
Yes.
and then the two mounds for both of the pyramids. And then, okay, so I want to ask you then, who do you think built those pyramids then to mark that?
That is an amazing question. And actually, I think that it goes back very, very far in time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's specialists who say that maybe it's even 30,000 or more.
Yeah.
So you have to be open-minded, because when you do this type of research, like I'm doing with the Neanderthals, you know, there's things that come out that you could never imagine that humanity was so smart so long ago.
Yeah, we're just learning a lot more about that. Like the Neanderthals were so capable of so much more than like we were told even, you know, a few years ago. So it's fascinating to learn more about this. Mike, did you have something?
We've got a question.
Yeah. Oh, let's get it here. We got a question from the online audience.
Thanks, Oana. One of the live stream viewers named Rubate has a question for you, and he asked, your proposal that the entire head, etc., was hand carved or hand created, do you think that they did it entirely by hand, or did they find a rock that was conveniently shaped and then modify it first?
Yes, I think the modification in general is subtle. It's not complete like we have today, but just to enhance the stone. It was already sacred. So the natural formation had a profile or a face, and then just a bit of touching, just a bit of retouching, just so you can have different alignments that are very precise.
I think that makes sense in the context of our global inheritance. So thank you so much for sharing with us today, and thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Anna. We're still going here.